YouTube. Bear with me one moment.
I know when it's ready.
All right, you should be good to go, Mr. Chairman.
All right, I'll call the Governance Committee meeting on Wednesday, January 6th, 2021 at 5:32 p.m. Roll call, Tatiana,
Here.
Martha, she's not here, and Sylvia.
Present.
Great. And myself. So we have 3 trustees present. The approval of the agenda is next.
I'll make a motion that we approve the agenda for the Waukegan Public Library Governance Committee meeting for Wednesday, January 6th, 2021.
And I second it. That's Sylvia.
Okay, so Tatiana motion to approve the agenda and Sylvia seconded. Well, there's no discussion, is there?
No discussion.
All right, we'll vote on it. Tatiana,
Aye.
Sylvia,
Aye.
and myself, aye. All right, so item A under new business and action agenda review policy schedule. John, do you want to take this item?
Yes, sir. Let me go ahead and share my screen, take you to our policies webpage.
Okay.
Everyone see our library website?
Yes.
Okay, so in terms of our policy schedule, we have a last review date of some of these from 2017. And initially, when I first joined the board, the library staff, we were meeting regularly and then we stopped at some point. So there's a lot of these that have older review dates. So the thing is, and as the library is the cornerstone of any good democracy, and we are intentionally setting policy to make sure that we, again, not only protecting the liability of the library, but also making sure that we are protecting the staff and the patrons. There are some library policies that aren't on our policy schedule that I think they're worthy of consideration, but big picture is this is the dates that everything was most recently updated, and these are accurate. So, so the harassment policy, which we recently passed, for example, in September, may in fact deprecate the policy that was passed in 2018, the harassment-free workplace policy. And at this point, I think it might be redundant to have some policies without, when we adopt a new one, eliminating the old one. So if I may show you one of our policies, for example, the ethics policy. This is the ALA Code of Ethics, and it basically is taken straight from the ALA website. And that is something that we ascribe to as a library. But at the bottom of every one of our policies that in 2017 is information about the former director. And I think it's prudent to make some changes to our policies, especially we make policy changes. First of all, we review them. Best practices bi-yearly. So once every 2 years, we would review policies. Now, at the bottom of every policy is a statement that says that any policy that is required by law to change, we would change those. And ideally, there will be other policies based on our insurance or based on changes that need to be made for the library's sake that we have to change on the fly. So based on law, sometimes laws change, and those will be presented to the governance committee in timely manner so that we don't lapse in terms of the law. But our policies are broken down into about 4 different categories, really. It's the operations, standard operating procedure. And now I will share another document with you. That this was the policy schedule that was set before I started. So I just want to say that this is not an official document. It was an internal document to help us make sure that we set some intentions for making sure that policy would happen in a timely manner. So one thing that Selena had done was numbered the policies, and I believe this to be a prudent step. You note that the dates of these are not all accurate, but these numbers help us line up where the policy should fall. And so in terms of our internal document, the 100s are our library users. and these policies are there to protect our library users. The 200 policies, which is gifts, library cards, operating, the standard operating procedures, all the way through the FOIA policy, which doesn't exist on our website, might I add. Some of these, like the credit card usage policy, isn't on our website, but it says that it was passed. So I have to do some research and find out why some of these policies aren't on our website. But then the 300s are more of our library staff policies. Here's a working from home policy that apparently used to be, and a staff parking policy, which I didn't know that we had such a thing except for a memo from the former director. But see, the 300s are more of our personnel type policies. And then most recently passed in September is our sexual harassment prohibition policy. Then the 400s are more money stuff, financials, purchasing policy, naming policy, fines and fees, with the redacted version is now deprecated. And so we've now got fines and fees 420/1 with fines and fees of September 2020 we approved. And a credit card policy, which is not currently on our website, like I said. And then the 500s are more of about our collection. So the collection development policy, which is another good one to look at because a lot of things change. The collection development policy and, oops, I jumped away. The disposal policy, so how we do away with materials so that the patrons don't think that we're just willy-nilly throwing things in dumpsters. And last but certainly not least, our Ray Bradbury collection. Important to note is that we don't put cart before horse. And so I think that some of the conversations that we've had about the Bradbury collection, for example, have been productive and fruitful and will yield some results as we move closer to partnership with the Parks and Historical Society. But I think our Ray Bradbury policy is an example of one that was written. I'll stop sharing for a moment and show you back to our website. Was written when we had it, and initially we're looking to sell part of the collection, or that was one of the things that the library had considered doing. So let me go to the Ray Bradbury collection policy. And again, every 2 years it should be reviewed. So it's 2020. It would have been the best date to review this, but we were in the midst of a pandemic. So for example, we've got a purpose, an objective, the collection criteria. And this is, again, why review and change, moderate change, rather than completely rewriting policies, making small incremental changes to the policies makes more sense. So sale of items, at this point, it's become determined that we wouldn't want to sell any portion of this collection. And unless that absolutely necessary, I think that was perhaps part of the policy so that they could pay for the upkeep or any decisions like whether parts of it would stay a part of the whole collection or not. So again, there is information in here about access to the collection. And then as is famous at the bottom, we've got adopted by the Board of Trustees in 2018, March. So this was passed right after our former executive director started. And as a good example of, we don't need to change a whole lot about it, but I certainly think that if we want to, now that the partnership possibility has come up with the Parks and the Historical Society, this gives us an opportunity to rewrite the policy as it would then serve the purpose of that collection, but not until we've hashed out some of the details on the staff end and working with the Parks and with Ty and Josh Bill at the Historical Society to make sure that we're all working together to make sure this collection is accessible, because that's the intention, is to make our collection accessible to our community. But these policies are the cornerstone of the library, and also then being the library the cornerstone of the democracy, we have a very significant responsibility to make sure that these policies are reviewed consistently, and again, as required by law. So that is my presentation about our policies. I am certainly open to, and I think we should, Josue, you and I as chair of this committee, we should sit down and kind of go over and start a plan of attack for the board to decide which ones need to be done immediately, which ones can be done within 2-3 years, but some of them are definitely in need of review.
Thank you for that presentation, John. Just out of just like off this list, which policies do you think are most in need of attention soon?
John, you're muted.
I apologize. I think, again, the sexual harassment prohibition policy may deprecate to harassment-free workplace policy, which that is was primarily a sexual harassment policy. So, I mean, doing away with the ones that are not necessary, and that is something, again, we don't want to take on too many of these at once. I was always given the analogy of eating an elephant, and how does one eat an elephant? In one bite at a time. So the massive sweeping changes that happened in March and February, you know, these were important policies, but now is the time to pick some important ones. So library cards, for example, we did away with fines and fees, but I noticed that our collection development policy, for example, still has the $10 threshold in it. And if I sorry to make anybody dizzy, but there is still information about if you go above the $10 threshold, where did it go?
Okay. Does anyone have any questions?
I don't have a question, but I'm thinking that because they're so public, that we should be able to go on and just start looking at them and highlight those items that are standing out, like what John just said, because all those policies have something like that in them. And so, you know, one by one, I think, you know, we should be able to go through and highlight and then come back together and decide, do we want to still keep that particular policy or do we want to change it totally?
I was
So
going
that's
to
just
second that and say that I thought maybe if we just break it down and take, you know, as many as we each can and review them and then make any necessary, you know, make notes of changes that need to be made, rather than, I think that's the most time sensitive option.
If I may again share oh, Martha has entered the waiting room. Would you guys like to seat Martha? Bear with me.
I move that we bring Martha into our meeting.
Second that.
Sylvia's motion and Tatiana second to seat Martha. All those in favor, or we'll take a roll call. Tatiana,
Aye.
Sylvia,
Aye.
Josue, aye. How about Martha?
Make sure that she got in.
Do you hear me now?
Yes.
Hello.
Martha.
Hello, John just gave a presentation about the policy schedule that he put together. Did you send that out to us, John?
Well, this is something that was used internally. This is not something that was shared with the board. I mean, it may have been shared with Sylvia previously when Selena was here, but this is not. I had worked on another version of this that had all the links embedded in there and everything, and that's on a different computer at work. So
Okay.
I will certainly share this document. But if I think in terms of breaking it down, if we look at the 100s, the 200s, the 300s, and the 400s, for example, we haven't got a lot of information about our policies in terms of money. And one of the things I've tasked Anna with, for example, is to work on developing internal controls so that we already have them and we do those things, but none of them are penned down in paper that this is what we do or how we do it. And if they are, then it's older. So we need to make sure it's updated. But there should be some policies like, for example, the spending limit inside of the, or which one was that? Inside of the policy that changes the limit that the director can spend, for example. That's just one little piece that can be changed. But I think in terms of financial policy, that's something that we certainly could use somebody to work with Anna directly in pinpointing where the most need is for these financial policies. In terms of the 500s, since we have a group of people that are involved or affiliated with the parks, it might be prudent to put somebody on working with the parks outside of the employees of the parks, for example. So like the collection policy might be a nice one to distribute to working with the Ray Bradbury collection, making sure that it goes into good use. Some of these are not really absolutely necessary to, gifts. If people want to make a gift, we need to make sure that we can make appropriate thanks to people, but then their media and relations and photography pretty much set it and forget it. public posting and exhibits. We currently don't allow people to post anything unless it's gone through our hands. And I think that process is not broken. So don't try to fix it. But in terms of pinpointing, I think it makes a whole lot of sense to have board members, kind of split up and take a section.
Well, I don't have any questions other than I'll meet with you to discuss what policy should be on the more on the upcoming governance committee meetings, so we can discuss them and present more recent policies to replace the older ones. If anyone else has any questions, you can go ahead and ask.
So I was wondering if we could just split them up between the four of us and we could look over a certain number of them versus, I mean, we could go through and do, a section, but I'm just thinking to divide it up and we can just go through the number, like six, like each of us could pick six of them or take, six in succession and just go through the policy. And then we can come back and see if there's something better out there, or at least just to update, the information that's on them, because some of them, like John was pointing out, have information on them that's outdated.
May I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, my question is like some places where when you click on it, it takes you automatically to that paper or that PDF. Is that how this is set up, or no? It's all paper. Like, is this scanned in where you can just click on like what you have listed there and you can just go directly to it?
If I may, I'll share with you the screen. This is our library website. And on the library website is a copy of all the current policies. I think, again, unless it's been done away with, or maybe missing a credit card policy on here, but there basically is the list. You click on the link and it takes you to our collection development policy.
Okay, thank you.
And they're also downloadable. You can download them and save them without having to be connected to the internet. They're all PDFs.
Josue, is it okay if we split this up rather than wait for you to meet with John and then come back to us?
Yeah, we can do that, but I think that there's some policies that probably should be at the front of our discussions instead of, like, I know that there's some more recent ones, and then some older ones that John would probably think we should discuss a little sooner.
An example, I think the purchasing policy is what we were talking about a moment ago, and that still says 20,000. So we have not updated this, but it was changed. But these few lines was changed, so this should be changed. There's definitely some things we could sit down and talk about what needs to be updated for sure.
So that's why I was thinking that we could just go through and, just pull out the ones that we think need to be done like right away.
Can you go on the gift one? Gift policy?
Some of them are very short, just a page. So this is the gifts policy. Waukegan Public was adopted and approved on the 27th or 2017, pardon me. And support of the library, private support, gifts, unrestricted or restricted, gifts of books and so forth will be accepted, but we typically just give those to the Friends of the Library for sale. Gifts of real estate property is converted into cash. Non-cash gifts will be converted as soon as possible. But this is, I don't know, Douglas can chime in, but this looks to be boilerplate. And I don't know if it's any of those things. May I answer any questions? I guess, Douglas, what do you think? Is this boilerplate?
That one strikes me as rather boilerplate, although I will note that, I've seen a lot of different gift policies over the years and gift, especially for 501 type organizations. I do notice that, for example, yours does not, give them receipts for tax purposes, and whether or not that's something the board wants to consider or not consider. I mean, there are things in that could be discussed by the board that would have impacts both, legally as well as, staff impacts. So just be aware that, as we go through each of these, there may be pitfalls that will need to be considered.
So even just little things, and that was Douglas in 1 minute worth of review of this document while it was, so there's little things in every single one of
Right.
these that need to be addressed and adopted, changed and adopted as necessary. But again, I defer to Douglas in terms of making sure that there may be policies on here that we need to focus on more specifically because of law. And I'm not familiar if over the past couple of years there were laws that were passed. I mean, anything that I was familiar with, we need to focus on the policies, especially that we're liable or that we're we're vulnerable to any kind of litigation or anything like that. So we want to make sure that we're protecting the library's interest and the taxpayers' interest as stewards of the public trust.
I agree with John, and one thing that I would just say, and something that I've discussed with John in the past, is that a lot of the staff policies will need to be updated, and that both the board is going to eventually need to have to approve those, but also that the board may want to hire an outside HR firm to come in and help them draft some of these policies. I mean, I'm happy to do one-offs, like we did with the sexual harassment policy. I'm happy to continue to revise the drug and alcohol policy as we go forward. But, things like, personnel policies generally, the staff handbook, those are going to be documents that are going to need to be reviewed, with some specialized knowledge. It's not just something that, the board can say, oh, we want to make this change. Without carefully considering, all of the different things that are affected by that.
So I think we put together a schedule of how we want to review the policies. My concern with splitting it up is that we'll have different views and opinions on each policy, and one of us might think it's okay as it is, and then we'll just not pay as much attention to it as someone else would. So I'd rather look at it together than separately, if that's okay. But then we follow a schedule that John, I think, puts together based on priority.
So I will make a point of reviewing all the policies and of course consulting with Douglas on the ones that we may have any kind of liability or any kind of exposure. And certainly I agree with Douglas in terms of like the personnel ones are really tricky. They have to be updated as changes are made, and that one's really important to make sure that we're protected.
And I mean, I don't mean to be like, Debbie Downer here. I'm really not trying to do that, but I do think that, you do have to be careful with a lot of these policies that they do have impacts. I mean, even the gift policy. I mean, if we do that incorrectly, you can screw up, your federal tax, stuff. Technical terms.
But some things that you have on there, they have that at other places too. So like when I've donated to Salvation Army or whatever, or Goodwill, then they give you the suggestion. And then when I go to my H&R Black lady, she says, well, you write down what you think it is. And they don't tell you, you just do your own thing, but then that's your responsibility. But the thing about, I think that we should be giving out a letter because, like this right now before December, that would have been a time like, like if you're interested in donating, and a lot of places weren't taking as many donations just because of the COVID, whereas we could have been doing it, we could have gotten some money like in November, December, maybe some donations that maybe some people say, oh, you know what, I'm going to give $100 or $200 or whatever. And all you need to do is just give a letter and that's it. So maybe in the future, maybe look at that.
And our informal policy or procedure of how we would, if someone makes a donation, we offer them a receipt, but it's not in the policy, and it should be. It certainly should be.
In fact, your policy says the opposite. Exactly. You won't give them something, I believe I saw in there. So
I know.
I'm not suggesting that that's a change you need to make. I'm just suggesting that there are things in these policies that are going to have impacts. Right. And so let's just be careful as we're going through this. That's all I'm suggesting.
Does anyone else have any questions? All right.
No,
well,
thank you.
thank you, John, for presenting that. I think that that gives us something to work with in the governance committee moving forward. I know we've started working on some things last year, but there's also priorities that we should probably work on in the coming months. Was there any public comment?
There was no public comment.
All right, well, that really is it for the agenda. Next month, we'll have real policies to discuss, right? Something.
Yes, sir. We'll make some suggestions to changes, and again, it may just be a matter of going through and picking the ones that we need to do the most. It certainly is that.
Okay.
We'll have something next month.
I move to adjourn.
I second.
Sylvia, motion to adjourn, and Tatiana second. We'll take a vote. Tatiana,
Aye.
Sylvia,
Aye.
Martha,
Hi.
and Josue. Aye. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
All right.
Thank you. Good night.
Good job.
Thanks, everybody.